everybody, it is Dean Z speaking to you from Jeffries Hall at the University of Michigan Law School. Today I want to talk to you about a subject that I actually covered in an earlier episode, episode 18 for those of you who are completists. In that one I think I called it Talking About Difficult Subjects. But I want to refresh the topic because I think it is extremely relevant in the wake of the Students for Fair Admissions decision by the Supreme Court, which I talked about also in an earlier episode. But you will recall that I said that Chief Justice Roberts ended the majority opinion with a paragraph talking about how people can still talk about race in their applications, but it's not like a backdoor way for schools to take race into account, which is to say, if you have a story about your life that is race-related, you can tell that story, and if it is illustrating something important about your character traits or your skill set, schools can take that into account. But they have to do that to the same degree for students of any race. Okay, so that makes sense. But I do think that this has been interpreted in many corners as an exhortation to students of color, in particular, to tell stories about race, and in particular stories of hardship related to race. And that concerns me. So therefore I wanted to bring this up. Earlier in the summer, I read a terrific essay in The Atlantic by someone who turned out to be, I was reading it and loving it, and then I was thrilled to realize that it's someone who is a sociology doctoral student here. Her name is Aya Waller-Bay. And her area of scholarship is in admissions, actually. And she has worked in admissions and undergraduate admissions. So her essay was talking about something like a problem in admissions is about to get worse. And it was about this exact topic, about how students are often urged to take stories about the most painful parts of their background and turn them into fodder for admissions essays. And she and I actually connected over Zoom a couple weeks ago and had a terrific conversation about this issue. So if you see anything written by her, look it up. But I also have heard many of my admissions colleagues talk about students should write, instead of writing the traditional diversity essay, they should now be writing adversity essays. Same idea, talk about something really rough from your past and use it to illustrate something about yourself. So why do I have concerns about this advice? I have two reasons. One, the students, I'm concerned on behalf of the student or the applicant, and I'm concerned in terms of what it will do to them, and I'm concerned about what it will do in terms of outcomes. So when I'm thinking about the student's emotional well-being, these are very painful. What's being discussed here is the idea of something very painful that you are, writing about for a stranger to read. And I think that has the potential to reopen wounds that may have been closed. I think that has the potential to dig at wounds that maybe aren't closed, to just cause a lot of pain. And also, I often talk to students who say, I thought about writing about this, but it just didn't feel right. It felt like I was exploiting something that was serious and personal. I didn't want to talk about it. And so the students who have that feeling, who then feel nonetheless pressured to write about this topic, that creates a whole new uncomfortable set of sensations. So I'm worried about the state of mind of someone who is feeling pressured to write this. I should note here, though, sometimes people will be writing about this and not feel any pressure. This is a sincere and carefully considered approach to adequately conveying information about themselves to an admissions office. In which case, my concern, I don't mean to make this a universal concern. My concern is for people who think, I don't really want to do this, but I'm being told to do this. But my second set of concerns has to do with how effective this is going to be. I think there is a sense out there that if you have what's is often called a trauma narrative, that is the golden ticket, that is the thing that is going to get you into school. And in and of itself, that's not true. It is true that the people reading these stories often feel a lot of emotions reading them, and it can be really challenging. But it still doesn't necessarily translate into getting admitted. for a couple reasons. One reason is that it's actually, I think, very hard to do one of these essays and do it well. Whatever essay topic you are selecting, it needs to be a means to an end. You should always be asking yourself, why am I writing this? What is it that I am hoping to convey? You're not just telling a story, however compelling the story is. It is to portray yourself as a future professional and a future professional law student. So, number one is the story that you're thinking about. Does it actually illustrate things about you that are important? Now, sometimes these stories really do, and if well told, can be incredibly powerful and moving. I like to listen to podcasts, and I was listening to this very old Washington Post podcast from like 2015 called Presidential. It's terrific. If you haven't listened to it, I highly recommend. But one of the things that comes out of listening to all these stories of different presidents is that many presidents have had incredibly troubling childhoods, and they used the pain of those childhood events to propel themselves to greatness, to the presidency. So obviously, it is, we could all think of stories of people who have been strengthened by their adversity. And it develops resilience, it develops a sense of perspective, it develops, can develop empathy for others who've had troubles. It can do all sorts of great things, but not always. And even if it does, you have to be sure when you're crafting the story that you are focusing on that element of the story. And again, I want to be careful that you don't hear me saying, you need to, put a happy smile on the face of the admissions officer when they're reading this. That's your goal. That's not what I'm saying. But I am saying that, pain and sadness for the sake of pain and sadness alone is not a great strategy for getting in. You've got to have a point to that story. So be sure if you're telling the story that you have, you know what you're trying to achieve. I also think, it's really important if you're thinking about writing an essay, involving your racial identity or any other marginalized identity for that matter, that that the world recognizes that this doesn't have to be a story of pain. Being a person of color in this country obviously carries with it, it's fraught, right? Like there are going to be incidents of racism in everyone's life, I think, who's a person of color. But there's also really great stuff that goes along with having a particular community and that is different than the broader community, right? So talking about race and talking about the strength and positive characteristics that have come to you from your race doesn't mean telling a story of adversity. So when I was talking to Aya in this Zoom call a couple weeks ago, she said that one of the things she says to people when she's counseling them about what to write about, she'll say, well, what do you love about yourself? And I thought that was so profound and really terrific. And I think it's really, really great to be thinking about what it is that you feel very positively about yourself and maybe thinking about trying to convey that in your essays. And that may not be dependent on a story of pain or trauma. Bottom line, in writing your essay, it's like having a very brief conversation with someone you haven't met. And there may be circumstances where it makes sense to lead with a story that maybe is the worst thing that ever happened to you. But that is rare to do in a face-to-face conversation. It's rare that you're going to think that seems like a great idea. And I think you should also be questioning it when you're writing your essays. Just make sure that this really is what you want to do and this is the best vehicle for telling your story and that you're not doing it simply because someone else told you this is what you need to do. Final thing to think about is, where is this essay going after you send it to the admissions office? It is possible, the rules will vary at different schools and there is privacy protections for students, but it is possible that other administrators, faculty may see these essays down the road. And if you end up applying for a job that requires security clearance, like in the Department of Justice, for example, we law schools will have to send your entire application material to your future employer. So, think about that and make sure you are comfortable with this story possibly being shared with a somewhat broader audience. Okay, I think that is all I have to say about that. I hope that's useful. I really would welcome your comments and questions either below or by email to us at law.jd.admissions@umich.edu. And as always, thank you to Dustin Johnston, who rearranged his schedule to do this at a time where I could fit it in. And wherever you go, go blue.